We're continuing our series using the image of a three-legged stool, loving God, loving others, and loving the world. Loving the word too, loving the world. These are the legs of the stool, if you will. And the point I'm trying to make, perhaps it's obvious, is a sturdy and stable stool, say that 3 times fast, a stool with 3 legs is stable and sturdy. And let me suggest that a life built on loving God, loving others, and loving the world around us leads to a stable and sturdy life. If we love God, if we love others, if we love our community or the world around us, the rest is just details, as the t-shirt says. Is this simplistic? Yes. Is it simple to state and even perhaps simple to understand? Yes. Is it a challenge and is it easy to implement? For sure it's a challenge. It is not easy to live with these 3 things always in the forefront of our hearts and our minds. So last week, a quick recap, we talked about loving God. How do we love God? We love God through worship, what we are doing this morning, and worship, sort of how we live our life in light of God and in light of what we do as work to God. So worship is our whole life. We love God through prayer, through both praying to Him, but as I'm increasingly becoming aware of being silent and hearing from Him. As I said last week, sometimes we're too busy praying to hear God speak. And then I suggested creativity as a way to love God. And this one is even fuzzy in my mind on exactly what I mean, but He asks us to sing to God a new song. He asks us to be fresh and creative. He gives us all of creation to enjoy and flavors to mix and match. Who thought first to put honey and garlic together? But boy, does that taste good. Creative living honors God. And then we honor God, we love God through learning about Him, learning with Him, learning together, learning about our world and how we can act. But we love God through those. So this morning I want us to focus on loving others. And there's a whole realm of stuff that I could talk about, but I really want to focus this idea of hospitality. Basically, it's meeting and welcoming others, friends and strangers alike, to the table, to our table, to inviting them into our space, friends, neighbors, and those we don't know yet, strangers, we invite to our table. If it's okay with you, I'd like to start considering this by considering the life of Jesus. Is that okay? Can we talk about Jesus on a Sunday morning? Is that okay? Thank you. Not a rhetorical question. How did Jesus live? The youth poster boards downstairs. What did Jesus say? How did He do? What did He think? How did He live? It's important that we look at that. And we've been studying, as I've mentioned, the book of Luke, both on Tuesday afternoons and Wednesday night. And if you look at Luke, you will realize that Jesus loved to eat. So are you ready for this? I can't read that. Either can you. It doesn't matter. This is on purpose to sort of emphasize where Jesus met at tables. So Luke chapter 5, He met at Matthew, the tax collector's house. At Luke chapter 7, He met and ate at Simon the Pharisee's house. At Luke 10, He sat with Mary and Martha. At Luke 11, He sat with another Pharisee. At Luke 14, He had a Sabbath meal at another leader's house. Luke 19, He dined with Zacchaeus. Luke 22 was His last supper with His disciples and His followers. Luke 24, after Christ, after resurrection, He ate with those 2 apostles and revealed Himself to them. And Luke 24, He he asked, "Don't you have anything to eat?" to his disciples, and he ate with them. Jesus loved to be at the table. He loved to eat with people. He was accused of being a glutton by the Pharisees, and they thought it was an insult. And I think he kind of said, yeah. Well, he didn't say, yes, I am, but he said, I love to be with my people and eat with them. He saw these times. If you read these stories again carefully, in each moment there was a teaching opportunity. When you're sitting at the table and just sharing life together, teaching opportunities, and I don't mean that harshly, but moments and opportunities to have deeper discussions show up. How many movies do we watch? And some of the most interesting parts of the movies are around a dinner table. There's a whole movie called Babette's Feast that is all about this woman designing a table for her friends. And at that table, long-held animosity and adversarial relationships were reconciled. Tables are the place where things happen. To make it more central to Jesus' teaching, we read in Matthew chapter 25, verse 35. Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read this verse in English, and then I'm going to ask one of our Mandarin speakers to read it in Mandarin. So I will. For I was hungry, Jesus said, you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. So someone from the Mandarin community, read that in Mandarin. Thank you. Alice just jumped in and read. You put your hand up. You're so polite from school, and she just jumped in and read. So do not be shy. If you put your hand up, somebody will read for you. When you invite somebody in, you are inviting me in, Jesus says. So there's something even mystical, let me say it like that, of inviting a stranger into your space, into your community, that Jesus identifies with that spot. Welcoming a stranger is fundamentally characteristic of our faith. It is rooted in the central story of the Bible. The central story is from bondage to freedom, from separation to reconciliation. The idea of hospitality is central to that. We started with honey from the rock is something in Deuteronomy. If you read Deuteronomy over and over again, Deuteronomy talks about being careful with strangers and aliens and widows. The book of Leviticus is a book that is awfully hard to read because it's rule after rule after rule, but many of them talk about inviting the stranger in. Again, let me read this in I will read it in, there we go. No. I will read it. I have them both. I thought I had them both. No, I don't. Okay. Let me read Leviticus 19, 33 and 34, and then I will invite a Mandarin reader to read it. Leviticus 19, 33, 34. When a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. A foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So once you were foreigners, therefore you understand the plight of foreigners. So I am the Lord your God, he said. So I'm hoping this is the right one. So read that. Yeah. my thing isn't working. Oh, well, they'll catch up. Because we know what it is like to be a stranger. We've all had that experience of being the odd man out, a stranger at the table, a minority, a marginalized. Then we should have the empathy and even perhaps the sympathy for people who are in that position and welcome them into our space. And then in Hebrews chapter 13, 1-3, let me read this to you again in English. Keep on loving one another as brothers and sisters. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. Continue to remember those in prison if you were together with them in prison, and those who are mistreated as if you yourselves are suffering. That's empathy. That's putting yourself in their shoes, as the colloquial saying goes. So do we have those in Mandarin? Another voice. Uh-oh. There's the next one. Keep going. Another voice, a male voice. Hospitality is important. Inviting people is important. Inviting people to your table, strangers to your table, is important. It is arguably the best way to advance even the gospel and the kingdom. If you are sitting in a relaxed setting, eating together, opportunities for conversation show up. One of our own, Linda McGibbon, and I know she has moved on, but I'm still claiming her as one of our own, moved from the East Coast to one of the condo towers, actually not far from here, and wrote a book called Vertical Neighborhood, My Vertical Neighborhood. So in this condo tower, she just began to use the common room, as I remember the story, prepared food, and opened the door. Whoever showed up, showed up. She had a friend in the condo tower they were doing this together. And this developed into a regular meeting, and then breakfast times and book studies and movie studies and all sorts of weird and wonderful experiences. And she wrote the book, My Vertical Neighborhood. And why I am pointing that out is it is a great example of how to do this simply. She just had the attitude to do it. And sometimes people brought food. Sometimes they had to prepare food. There weren't any kind of real rules around it. They just lived with figuratively and literally open doors, certainly an open heart. The other book, it starts with hello, makes the point that sometimes we in the Western world have replaced hospitality with entertainment. Now, I don't mean singing and dancing entertainment. I mean the grand and formal entertainment that sometimes makes people uncomfortable. A footnote to this, there is a place for formal dining. Wedding receptions and Thanksgiving dinners, these probably need to be more formal. And even what I said last week about creative display on the table and creative food. And that is appropriate and necessary often. But hospitality is more than that. We had some of our best friends in our Guelph church. On a Sunday afternoon, she would just make sure there's a huge pot of chili on the stove, and whoever came, came. And it was an open door and an open heart. It is about openness. There's another image in, I want to say Deuteronomy, but I'm not sure, but Moses talks about the idea of a clenched fist or open hands. And are we open with our lives, open with our homes even? Are we hospitable to our neighbors? Are we living in a way that Jesus lived and therefore asks us to live? Time for nerding out on Sunday morning. Hospitality in Greek is philoxenia. I've terribly mispronounced that. And the Greek term literally means love of the strangers or friend of the strangers. Now, you will see in that word, philoxenia, phileo we've talked about, haven't we? It's brotherly love. It's the Greek word for love that refers to brotherly love. Philadelphia, the city of friends, friendship. So phileo is brotherly love, and xenia, we get xenophobia, the fear of others, the fear of the strangers, is xenophobia. So how do we love others? How can we be a friend of strangers? As we study culture and live and think about culture, hospitality is one of those things that have very different rules or attitudes towards hospitality. But in the Greek world, in the Middle Eastern world where Jesus lived, it was an incredibly important code of conduct that was shameful if you didn't abide by the codes of conduct. Luke chapter 7, verses 34, I think, and following. Jesus has almost a confrontation with a Pharisee, because Jesus said to the Pharisee, when I came in, you didn't wash my feet. When I came in, you didn't greet me with a traditional two-cheeked kiss. When I came in, you didn't honor me as a guest at your table. And in that story, a sinful woman was doing those very things. And so Jesus was challenging him, but at a cultural level, simply challenging him. It was shameful the way he acted. So greeting and receiving people in that context was an imperative, something that they must do to show even simple courtesy. It's defined as a way of life. It is their way of life. Offering comforts like food and shelters to travelers. If you travel even now in the Middle East and you need a place or need some food, hospitality is there for you. Even our time in Kenya. Oh, time for another Kenya story. Even our time in Kenya. Diane and I were walking quite late in the afternoon, probably about 6:30, so it was just getting dark, and it was pouring rain, and we had our umbrella, and there were these two little old ladies walking up without an umbrella, carrying their grocery bags. And Diane said, let's just hold the umbrella and walk them to their gate. And then we would say goodbye and go home. So we thought. So we walked to their gate, and they insisted that we come in and have chai. And so we sat there and had chai. And as we sat there for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes, other neighbors sort of gathered around and sat with us, and we shared hospitality for that time. And we said we should have known that we couldn't just get away with walking to their house, but they opened their house and show hospitality to us. Now, I've narrowly interpreted loving others as hospitality. But I think in the other ways we love others, there is a fundamental attitude of accepting, receiving, welcoming a stranger into our space, our table. As we move into communion, we're moving into the table. We're moving at the table. This table represents exactly those things for us. Jesus is our host, and he invites us and he welcomes us to his table. And he hears us, and he receives us, and he has his open hands for us. So before we move into communion itself, I'd invite the choir to come again and just prepare us for communion by, again, the hymn, Nothing But the Blood.